right, we are back with Basics of Buddhism, day 7. So we're getting up there. We are now, hi Jennifer. Um, we are now on the third element of the Eightfold Path. So the first two elements of the Eightfold Path, holistic view and holistic intention, were about wisdom and understanding. So that's the kind of background or overarching concepts. And now the next three elements are about ethics or morality, you'll see it, or what's the other word they like to use? I can't think of it. And what they mean by ethics is how our intentions and view are acted out in the world. So this is an incredibly powerful thing. It's nice to walk around with good thoughts, right? I mean, a lovely thing to do, but it's a whole other level of effect to actually bring these thoughts into manifestation in the material world. So it's a lot more powerful to our own minds and to other people. It has more power and more effect than simply thinking holistically, although of course the overall view helps the actions to arise. So it's not like it's totally separate. And ethics is the first element of the 8 limbs of yoga, and it's obviously important in all religious traditions that I know of. So it's not like ethics is kind of coming out of nowhere here, but the underlying sort of understanding about ethics, I think, is very powerful. It's not like we're just being told to do this. It's explaining to us why doing this will make us happy and other people happy, and us sort of first in that order. So the first of the 3 ethical elements of the path is holistic speech. Although you could also consider it to be holistic communication and include like emails and texts and Facebook posts or whatever else might not have been around at the time of the Buddha in this category in your mind. So speech is powerful because it can happen so quickly and so easily. So it might take you a little time to like go out and do something, but you can help someone or harm them in a second with a sentence or 2. So that's the power of speech and why it gets its own category separate from actions. If it wasn't that important, it would just be under the category of actions, which is tomorrow. But it gets its own category because of the power. And to consider the power of speech for a moment, think about something that someone may have said to you, maybe even many years ago, that was painful. How easy is that to remember? Did something just like pop into your mind, right? Even though it could have been, I don't know how old we all are, 40 years ago. And it just comes up. It's that memorable. Consider something you regret having said at some point in the past. How easy is that to remember? It's right there, right? Right there in our memories. And now think of something kind that someone said to you at some point. Consider this, consider how it may have positively impacted your life. Also very memorable, I assume. I know I can think of things that just like, wow, one sentence someone said to me 15 years ago, or a word. So this is an impactful place to become more aware in our response to the world. Holistic speech has 2 primary aspects. One is to be non-harming, and the other is to be honest. And I'm not saying that those are totally separate necessarily, but this is an easy way to break it down and talk about it. So first we'll talk about the non-harming aspect of holistic speech. And I've said this before, but I sometimes feel like I can't say it enough. I want to be clear that being kind and being nice are not necessarily the same thing. It could intersect, but nice is not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about kind. So what I'm not saying is that being nice, um, so being nice in a societal way, sort of how we've been trained to be, maybe especially as women, since it's all women currently on the screen, um, in a way that ignores dealing with something difficult, that kind of nice is not going to be considered holistic. That kind of avoidance nice, that kind of I'll just say yes when I mean no, that kind of like, you know, I don't want to stand up for something. Um, I don't feel powerful enough to whatever. All of that is not considered holistic. So that's not um, overall moving toward what's wholesome and helpful and skillful. So holistic speech is willing to deal with difficulty and say what's true when something needs to be said. And for some of us, maybe that's the part we really need to work on. We're all going to have different aspects of this that are going to be more or less challenging for us, and where we might need to put our energy. And I may have told this story in here, but I'll tell it again anyway. So one time when Sharon Salzberg was in India, she was taking a rickshaw to see her teacher Munindra. And on the way, someone tried to steal her purse. And she was able to wrestle the purse away. And then when she got to see her teacher, she asked, what should she have done? I mean, she's studying loving kindness. She wrote the book on loving kindness. This is what she's made her whole career about. She's a loving kindness person. So what should she have done? She asked him. And he said, with all of the loving kindness you can muster, hit him over the head with your umbrella. So we're not talking about letting people harm us or letting harm happen, when we can avoid it. So it's kind to not allow someone to harm you. That means they get the bad karma, you get the karma of sort of not caring about yourself. So it's important that we actually be quite strong in our kindness toward the better for everyone. So non-harming speech doesn't mean saying yes to everyone or pretending that things are fine when they're not, because this won't promote either harmony or well-being. Now, why will it not promote harmony? Because we may have been sort of trained, just like go along and that'll please everyone and make it fine. The truth, look to see in your own experience, but in my experience, eventually the truth comes out one way or another. It either your resentment or internal conflict like bubbles up at some point and you explode, maybe about something that's not as big as, the actual issue. Or you're unable to follow through with something that you said yes to. There's a whole sort of type of person who will say yes to anything you ask. And then when the time comes, they actually can't because they've said yes to everything. And it's physically impossible. So it may feel nice at the time to say yes, and then it's actually not because you didn't go and find someone else to do the thing for you. So it's maybe a little tricky depending on your habits. And as I do know, I said yes last time to Robin, as Jack Kornfield says, suppressing your feelings is like hiding the chocolate chips from yourself because you're on a diet, but only you know where they are. So it's like suppressing feelings doesn't mean they disappear. They're all stored there, building up, creating tension, creating anxiety, and causing conflict on the inside that will eventually come out in one way or another, whether it's sort of against the other person or against yourself. That depends on on the habits and the way you've been trained, but it goes somewhere. So what we're trying to do in a lot of ways is to not sort of accumulate the baggage, but to deal with individual situations as they arise the best that we can, given whatever, our current skill level is. And then we learn from what happens and we go forward building our skill set. There's going to be some trial and error and creativity and failing in order to actually learn what works with who, when, and there's no right answers. But that's good because it makes it interesting, right? Interesting work. So instead of that kind of nice speech, we're looking to speak from clarity and thoughtfulness rather than in reactivity. We want to consider the effects of what we're about to say, like to our best guess in the moment, and to look closely at our intentions before speaking. And that can be really the clue. As we get into the habit of doing this, looking for the intentions before we say something, it gets easier and easier. And because it becomes habitual, it doesn't have to take a bunch of time. You actually start eventually, maybe not like all the time, but in particular in sort of big conversations, to consider as you're about to say something like, what's my point? Like, what do I looking to accomplish by what I'm about to say? And is that really what I want to accomplish? Or am I just reacting, protecting? A lot of our protection mechanisms cause more trouble than not. So when we see that we're just trying to push someone away who we really don't want to push away, that's a great time to stop and say, okay, wait, I'm just going to bite my tongue for a sec and consider what's going to work here. So what are some examples of harmful speech? First of all, speech that's designed to hurt someone is obviously not holistic, whether it's to their face or behind their back. So that's pretty straightforward, but we'll talk about it because I really want the karma aspect to become sort of obvious. So in terms of karma, if it's to their face and you say something harmful, the clear karmic consequences are harming the other person, right? But also creating division between you. So I'm not saying you have to stay close to everybody that you know, and it's totally fine to have boundaries and to not have certain folks in your life. But speaking harshly or meanly to others just reinforces your hatred of them, which is a strong word, but that's what one of the words that we use in Buddhism to say not liking. So it reinforces the not liking and it makes it feel justified because you acted on it. And that's the deeper separation. That's not helpful. So it's totally fine to be like, yeah, you know what, this relationship isn't working. I think it would be better if we didn't speak anymore, but you want to send the person on their way with kindness or else the heart's contracted. It's not any fun. And there's this kind of isolation, separation, and shutting down that happens as opposed to saying, we're not good for each other. You know, I wish you well. That feels really different. So if the person's not there, what's the karma of speaking about them negatively to someone else? There's multiple issues with this. So first of all, they're probably going to find out, right? So, and then all the issues we've already talked about come into play. So that's the first problem. The second problem, which is maybe even worse, is how do you think the folks you're talking to about this other person are going to feel? So they know for sure that the next time they're not there, you're talking about them. Even if it doesn't feel that way to you, that's how you're advertising yourself as a human being. So now they don't feel safe around you. They don't feel safe telling you things. They're not as comfortable with you, even though they may, seem that way on the surface. Deep down, there's fear now. So they know you can't be trusted. They won't relax around you. They won't feel safe around you. And then the converse, I feel is kind of amazing. Like totally stop any negative talk about anybody ever in front of everyone. And you'll be amazed how people feel, how they just relax around you. And it could take a while because some of this stuff's subtle. But so the sort of karma of a lot of this stuff is like a long term. Doing this for a few years, you're going to start to see like shifts in the people around you and how they feel around you. And it's pretty amazing. So I highly recommend the kind of a long term. It takes a while for people to change their response to you, but it will happen. And it's amazing and fun. And it really shows that we're creating our worlds, like that our actions, not everything, we don't create the weather and we don't create, lots of stuff with other people, but we do cause responses in other people. And as you shift, speech is just a huge one with this. As you shift your speech over time, the world shows up different. And it's a really fun and remarkable process that I encourage you to explore for yourself and benefit from yourself. So in addition, why are we talking about other people behind their back? Like, what's really going on underneath that kind of behavior, speech? So one reason we do it is to create division between people, right? Like, I don't want so-and-so to be close to so-and-so as much as I am or something. So we sort of plant these seeds to divide other people. So speech can create or destroy harmony, whether it's at work, in social circles, or in families. And we need to be careful that our speech brings people together rather than separating them if we want to feel good about ourselves and enjoy a harmonious environment. So it's an incredibly powerful thing to have your speech orient toward harmony rather than division. It's really big, especially in like groups or work or like families. Another reason we might find ourselves gossiping, and I mean, we've been trained to do this and other people are doing it, right? So it doesn't mean that you're like, there's something weird about you if you ever do this. I mean, it happens, right? And we've been trained to do it. And now I'm trying to give you motivation to be the one in the group who stops it. So another reason we might do it is to bond with someone at someone else's expense, or to have an outlet for our anger at the person, or because of our own low self-esteem. And in those cases, whenever we act on a negative emotion by here speaking in line with it, it just reinforces the sense of anger, the sense of inadequacy, the fear, the confusion. It gets reinforced and they get stronger. And now we feel worse. So our actions, can turn around our negative emotions, or they can sort of spiral them downward into being worse. I don't know if that's down or up, but you know what I mean. So when we're about to say something negative about someone, and this involves, being aware of your speech before you say it, which is a great practice. Look to see, why am I saying this? So the inquiry into why am I saying this can be very revealing if we're brave enough to look calmly and clearly. And I think it's important here to not take what you're about to do personally. You've been trained to do it. It's how your family spoke, or it's how your culture speaks, or, how your friends spoke, or it's not like you made up this pattern and it's like your fault. It's none of our fault. It's nobody's fault. It's just habitual. We've been trained, and now we're old enough and ready to train ourselves, to raise ourselves more appropriately. And there just wasn't anyone to do that. I mean, I'm not, everyone was raised, differently, and has some things our parents did really well and some things they didn't. But and maybe your parents were awesome and you have very little of this stuff, but it's still there in subtle ways. I find even the places where I'm pretty good, there's subtle improvements I can make. And then there's other areas where the lack of skill was passed down generation to generation. And that's, I didn't make it up. I was trained that way. So I don't have to blame myself, or it doesn't have to be heavy, is my point. It can just be more fun, actually, to say, hey, I don't, didn't make that up. I don't really want to do that anymore. It doesn't feel good. And this other thing turns out feels really good when I try. So another type of harmful speech is called idle speech. And that doesn't mean that we can't make small talk to get to know someone or bond with them. So that can be super skillful, actually. What idle chatter means, it's like rattling on, wasting your breath, not allowing anyone else to express anything, and never letting your mind relax. It's essentially an expression of stress, and you reinforce your stress by letting it run the show. And that kind of speech also hogs all the airtime from other people who might have something they want to say. And I'm kind of a talker from New Jersey. We like We don't have a lot of empty space in conversations, and we talk over each other. And what I've learned very recently, actually, this one's taken me a long time, is that like I already know what I'm going to say, but I don't know what you're going to say. So like I have the opportunity to learn something about you or to learn something in general if I just shut up. But somehow this constant expressing of myself, um, if you think about it, it's actually really boring because I already know all this stuff. And that's helped me to just kind of chill out and listen. And it's actually way more fun. It was just habitual, right? And the great thing about a habit is that means it's changeable because it was learned. So, here we get to the second aspect of holistic speech. It's also true. And let's talk about why it's so important. Truthfulness is so important for us to be happy. So, first of all, there's the stress aspect. When we lie, we have to worry about the truth coming out. We have to worry about getting caught. We have to remember all of the supporting lies that may be required to back up the original lie. And then it can get actually kind of complicated depending on the situation. But even more interesting, why are we lying? What are we so afraid or insecure about? And this gets interesting. So the fear and insecurity are reinforced by our acting in reaction to them. And I'm a little bit of a broken record, but I'm just going to go over and over this sort of karmic train until it's completely obvious and repeatable. So now, we feel strongly enough that then we lie, and then that's sort of like, oh yeah, my fear or insecurity was justified enough for me to have spoken, and it just gets reinforced in our own system. Also, here's another issue. We're going to assume that other people are lying to us because it seems like what people do. And this is something to look for, like over time. If you take on, the not lying thing, look to see if people stop lying to you. They do. I mean, they might not always know what they have to say, and they might occasionally be like super blatantly not telling the truth, but they stop. All the weird lies stop because your mind just stops seeing it in the same way. It happens, and it's really nice. So look to see. A world where everyone's lying all the time is a treacherous and confusing place, honestly. And a world where people are clear to us is a lot more comfortable. So that's the benefit, one of the big benefits of telling the truth, honesty. And then there's other aspects other than the sort of blatant lies. And you don't have to be some like massive compulsive liar. That's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about probably little stuff, but the little stuff adds up. So just because you're generally truthful, this is still a really rich and interesting category to work on. Okay, what about exaggerating the truth? So this falls under this category. Why do we exaggerate? And this is one that I don't do it all the time, but I was doing sometimes, and it really for me showed up some interesting stuff. So why do we exaggerate? To make ourselves look more interesting or more important or more knowledgeable. It's a self-esteem issue, right? So why would we need to do that? It's because we don't think we're good enough as we are, or that our lives are good enough as they are. So we have to make up these amazing things. I just had the best ever thing, and I'm going to post it on Facebook about how it was the best experience of my life, even though it really was just okay. And doing that, saying that my trip, that was just okay, that wasn't good enough. So I'm going to make it sound better. And it's subtle, but this affects how we feel about our lives and ourselves. So it's actually, again, adds up to be kind of a big deal. So if we reinforce these feelings of inadequacy by speaking in reaction to them, we make them feel more real and more true. And not exaggerating actually feels great, even though it's one that I found like because it sort of feels innocent at the time. Like, oh, what's the big deal if I say there were this many people in that instead of that, or I don't know, whatever it is. But it adds up to saying, to giving in to the pressure to be different. And being honest is about being in line with reality, which is relaxing. So, how about minimizing the truth, not telling the whole truth, or a lie of omission? Again, same pattern. So, I'm sure that you understand. Look to see what the underlying fear or insecurity is, and consider the benefits of living more clearly and transparently, unafraid, and with integrity. And this brings us to what we haven't said, but needs to be said. And this is also considered part of the honesty issue. So, do you have any unfinished business? Is there someone you need to tell that you love them? Is there someone you owe an apology? Jack Cornfield asks, do you think you have forever? And I like teaching death and dying meditation courses. And if you're interested in that, there's one that we just did, I guess, last year. And that's all the videos are online after we're done with this. But, what happens at the end of someone's life, like you see that this person you love, want to come over here, is about to die. And all of a sudden, all the things that need to be said, they get said, and people are forgiven, and they work out really big things, because at the end of someone's life, all of a sudden, these past issues become much less important. Well, that's great if you have that opportunity. But sometimes, someone just goes and you didn't get a chance to do it. And then, if we're going to do it later anyway, why not do it now and then get the benefits of the lack of conflict between now and then? So it's a very compelling thing to do, and it takes courage, but it's got huge benefits in terms of transparency, lack of inner conflict, and harmony. Even if, and when I say harmony, telling someone something difficult and saying, I've had this problem with you that I should have told you 10 years ago. Like, that might not sound like harmony, but it's true. And if you feel that it needs to be said, there's going to be, and can be said in a skillful way, not just unloading or something, but actually, presenting something that the person might grow from, and that you might actually resolve your relationship with them by expressing, because you're actually holding yourself back from them because you don't trust them because they said this thing. So if it can be done in a way that's helpful, then it's going to be actually harmonious for everyone, even if it's interesting to figure out how to do it and what's actually helpful. So if we want to heal, if we want to be whole, we need to look at what we've been avoiding. All of this takes quite a bit of courage, but the benefits are living openly and transparently, not under the grip of fear, insecurity, and confusion. And we don't need to take this all on at once, and I recommend that you don't. What I recommend, the way I was trained and I enjoyed, was work with one element at a time. So for example, maybe you commit to not gossiping for a month and you see how it goes. At the end of the month, you could either choose to take another month on of the not gossiping if it felt like a rich area for you, or maybe you switch and try a month of not exaggerating or not interrupting people. I did a whole year. No, that was not giving advice. I did a year of not giving advice, and I'm a huge advice giver, and it really pissed a bunch of people off. But by the end of the year of not giving any advice, I was able to only give advice when asked, which is big. So that was one, and for the first year, I was just like, no, I can't do it. I took a vow. But maybe anyway, a month of not exaggerating, a month of not interrupting people. I did that one for a while. I did a couple years of not being vague when I get uncomfortable. Actually, I think have mentioned that before. Clear speech was the last piece I needed to do. I'm not saying my speech is perfect, but in terms of like overt picking something and really doing it, I was like, why? And nobody's lying to me anymore. There's all these things that are going so well. There's all this harmony, but I'm still not always getting the right response or getting sort of what I want. Not that I should always get what I want, but like things just weren't always going sort of appropriately. And I learned it's because I was getting vague. Like if I didn't totally know, I would just be vague with someone and hope that they guessed what I wanted, even though I didn't know myself. But I had to look to see that that's what was happening. And when I started clarifying my speech, even if it felt a little bit uncomfortable to say what was up, all of a sudden that last kind of piece became clear, and people were clear back to me because I was clear to them. So it's easier to pick sort of a doable length of time that you decide, and bite off little chunks of this challenge. Because if you just try to do all of them at once forever, it's hard to keep track of what's happening. So that's the way I recommend it. You decide, it could be a week, a month, a year. Keep the good habits and slowly work to change the ones that cause you and others pain. So you don't have to fix everything about your speech. You figure out the areas that are problematic for you and only work on those, because the other ones are fine. Although once in a while you might check back, because there can be fun, subtle things that aren't a problem for you. Like, 5 years in, you're like, everything's kind of cleaned up. Then go back and look at everything again from a more subtle point of view. And then those little changes can actually be really nice. The things that you'd be fine if you didn't change them, but changing them just sort of like it's the cherry on the sundae or whatever. It's really pleasant. So truthfulness is held in very high esteem in both Buddhist and yogic traditions because it's a commitment to reality. Our reactivity is essentially avoidance of reality, not being okay with things as they are and trying to change things in ways that don't work. And don't get me wrong, when I talk about acceptance, I don't mean never changing anything going forward. I mean accepting what's happened up till now. That's the real issue with it's not like acceptance means I'm never going to change the future or talk to you. But I'm not going to change the past by, not liking it. I wish it doesn't work that way. And that's what we're doing when we don't accept reality, is like not accepting everything that's happened up till now, which is unchangeable because it's already happened. So the early teachings of the Buddha to embrace all of life and release reactivity are designed to help us to turn toward our discomfort and difficulty. And instead of giving in to the knee-jerk reactions that make things worse, we can become more tolerant and wise. And then we can respond in ways that will be more effective in creating loving relationships and positive social change. Ram Dass said, to lie to another person, you have to see them as him or her or them, meaning as an object. So such distance, he said, that the act of lying creates turns out in the long run to cost more than the lie gained for you in the first place. So a big part of the Buddhist and yogic work is to realize when we're seeing or using other people as objects rather than subjects. And it's a question of respect. When we lie, we reinforce the idea that I'm over here and you're over there, instead of actually relating and connecting. And in some ways, what we're doing is reinforcing the idea that the other person isn't worthy of the truth in some way. So I'm not saying that it's never kind to lie to someone. There are occasionally probably little white lies that are kind and appropriate. I don't know, but it's totally arguable, right? And sometimes things are said in truth just to hurt someone. And it doesn't actually need to be said, or it's being said for the wrong reasons. So it's not like being honest is always going to be holistic. Um, so, and the point of this and all of these teachings is it's less about how it looks then from the outside and more about how it feels from the inside. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I saying what I'm saying? And how does it feel sort of deep down? So ultimately, these guidelines are not set rules. And that's why, because each situation is different. And it's really more about the intention than what it looks like from the outside. An appropriate response to the moment requires honest reflection on whether our current intentions are in line with our deepest values. So in the moment, moment to moment, consider whether your words are promoting harmony or division, truth or avoidance of reality, love or animosity. Having taken a moment to reflect, we then have the opportunity to potentially speak or communicate differently than we might have been trained to speak by our family or our culture. And that gets really interesting. This exploration takes time, and it's a rich source for personal growth and the development of wisdom. And what I love about it is, like, you can read books on this stuff, and obviously the stuff that I'm sharing with you, I've garnered from reading books and going to teachings and stuff, but really it's about using it in your life. Like, the wisdom doesn't come from a book, and it's nice to get the ideas, but obviously I think it's worth it, or I wouldn't be spending this time with you. But it's the application in your life and the feedback from the world that's interesting, where you start to make your own decisions and find your own wisdom that you can rely on because you've seen it in action in your life. Like, that's what's fun about this stuff. And that's the independence of the path, is putting the practices into practice in your life and seeing the results that you can rely on and have. That's what's called faith in Buddhism. It's not faith like believing in something you can't see. It's the faith gets translated as confidence, the confidence that you gain over time. Like, first you might have confidence from someone giving you the idea and it sounds kind of reasonable, but then you gain more confidence when you put it into practice and it either works or doesn't work. And if it works, then you gain confidence because you see that it's useful for you in your life. And that's what's interesting. So I encourage you to be creative and patient with the process and to enjoy the benefits along the way. Over time, look for changes in how the world appears to you as you speak more clearly, honestly, and kindly. And there's a lag. So it's not like immediately, like in the first month of changing your speech, you're not going to see the world change. But check back in like a year if you really choose to work on this. I mean, there's lots of things you could work on, but see how things change over longer periods of time. And it's funny. Over a year or two, things can actually, your perception of the world can change dramatically. Mine did. So see if other people relax, if they're more clear back to you, and if things go more smoothly. Notice how you feel internally and use this to motivate the continuing journey. So any questions or thoughts on holistic speech?
Karen, I think I got the list, but when you said work with one element at a time, I tried to make a list. Could you go through the list?
Yeah, so you can do honesty. I mean, all the things we talked about. Honesty is one, but you can break honesty down into outright lies, not saying things that need to be said, exaggerating. What else did we talk about? And then there's the kind of more social stuff, like talking negatively about people is a big one, I think, for our culture. Um, 'Cause speaking harmfully to people probably isn't a big one. But if it is for you, like if in a moment of getting, when your buttons get pushed, you call people names, like then that's a great, thing to do. I mean, it kind of depends on on how you are as a person. Um, for me, I did interrupting and giving advice. Not that there's something wrong with giving advice, but it was compulsive. So you might look at, different things for you. Um, for you, knowing you, maybe it's not saying, you know, when something actually bothers you, could be something like that. Um, or just like sort of saying that something's okay when it's not. Which doesn't mean that we have to get overly like every time something happens that's not exactly how we want, you have to speak up, right? I mean, about the things that matter.
This whole session made me think about my relationship with my mother. And my mom will say stuff that's like, and she's 93, but she'll say things that are very hurtful. And you'll go, Mother, you shouldn't say that. Well, it's true. And I mean, that's what she'll say. But she has a friend that I've noticed that she'll say, I just can't talk to so and so about, because Ramona never talks about people. And I noticed that she's kind of backed off from saying negative things about people because Ramona she won't go there. But everything you said in some aspect or another made me think of my mother today and my relationship with her.
So my mom was raised to talk negatively about people, so I was raised to too. And now when we're on the phone and she does it, and I don't even mean I mean things that really don't need to be said, like putting someone down, even if it's true. And I've just been started saying like I don't really want to talk about them that way. And
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not saying it stops it in the future, but at least it stops the conversation there. And that's harder to do in a group of people you don't know, right? I've had people come to me and say, what am I supposed to do when I'm in a group of 8 people and they're dissing on somebody? I mean, sometimes maybe you just don't chime in, right? But you don't try to control the group. But if it's one-on-one with a person you care about, I think it can work to say, it kind of makes me sad when we talk that way. Let's talk about something more positive.
Yeah, I've been more that way. Like, I really don't want to talk about that. I don't think we should be talking about that. But that was my mother and how I was raised as well. I know.
It's fascinating. And our jobs isn't to necessarily change our parents, right? Especially when they're 93. But we can tweak it in our own interactions with them. But I think, in other situations, it can be helpful to either not take part or, if you're comfortable, say, that makes me kind of sad to, I don't think that needs to be said, whether it's true or not. It's just a downer anyway. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Let's do a little practice. So let's settle the mind into the body by noticing bodily sensations. And we can get into this habit of sort of grounding the mind in the body Of course, it can be nice as you do this to relax the body, and maybe that's part of your habit. And maybe this is something you do multiple times a day. Maybe once an hour, you kind of feel your body and relax. Maybe over time, it becomes something you do sort of steadily through your life. But for now, the beginning of every meditation practice, the mind comes into the body, we feel the body, and it's grounding and relaxing actually for the mind. Even if the body doesn't feel that great, it's still calming for the mind. We'll allow the breathing to settle into a natural rhythm. Belly softens. Body chooses the rate of breath. And I'm going to give you some contemplations to contemplate. But as you do so, I'd like you to keep, 10, 20% of your mind in your body on the breathing so it stays sort of grounded and relaxed. And don't make that a stressful thing, just doing your best. Have a sense of the body. So I'd like you to bring to mind the last time that you didn't speak the whole truth. And look to see what was your motivation. Was it fear or lack of confidence or insecurity? Or was it anger or ill will? Remember how you felt at the time. And feel the sense of internal conflict that comes from saying one thing, but knowing that you actually mean another. Imagine the internal peace and clarity that you would feel if everything were out in the open. Nothing to hide, nothing to be ashamed of. No worry of being caught in a lie. No stress of having to remember partial truths, of having to create more lies to back up the original lies, and having to remember those too. No discounting of your experience as it is. And then come back to the bare awareness of simply being here in the body. Maybe observing the rise and fall of the natural breath. And it's a great skill to kind of bring up an intense contemplation and then drop it. Really interesting to be able to do this. It might take practice and it might be easy. And now I'd like you to bring to mind something untrue or harmful that someone said about you in the past. So, how did you feel? How quick and easy is it to harm through speech? How long can the effects of a few brief words linger? And then, even if this is just subtle for you, consider, why do you speak negatively about other people when you do? And does this make you feel better about yourself, or does it make you feel worse? And then we'll release this contemplation and relax back into the felt sense of the body. Again, observing the natural breathing. And now I'd like you to consider, is there anything that you are reluctant to acknowledge or admit to yourself? Are there any truths that you've been avoiding? And then again, we'll release the contemplation, relaxing the mind back into the body. comments, questions, thoughts?
A question. I don't know if you want to just turn the camera off or not, or keep going. I have I guess it's omitting. I'll find something positive to say. Like a friend read me this really awful letter to me that was not nice. And my comment was, I forget what a beautiful writer you are. That was written so well. Like, oh my God. Because I don't have anything nice to really like. I do that a lot. Like, I'm like, oh, just, it's okay. Like, I can walk away and, go home and not leave my house for 2 months. Like, it's okay. I don't know. How do you, like, I am harming myself. I see that, but I don't also want to harm someone else in the process.
So I happen to have a little information on the situation you're talking about because we've
Yeah,
talked
I'm
about it, right? So
So
that's
can't
nice.
respond.
I have a
Caroline.
sense of what you're talking about. And in the scenario as you described it to me, in the moment you didn't know what to say, right? So it's not like you omitted kind of a fully thought out, this would be the right thing to say. You just didn't know what to say and you were kind of overwhelmed. So you said something nice that was true, and that's fine. That can really disarm someone. So there's nothing wrong. That could be a totally skillful thing to do. And then you and I talked maybe a few days after it happened, and we talked about like things that you might, but you weren't comfortable. You were not willing or able to provide what the person actually wanted from you. Trying to be super vague, right? And you don't, so, and if you were to have this person in your life going forward, you would have to have an honest conversation. We talked about that. And you don't have to, right? You can kind of let people go and wish them well and not work it out with them. You get to decide. Or you can have the skillful conversation, or try to sort of work through when you said X, that hurt my feelings, and I've been sort of resentful and holding back ever since. And you get to pick, but I think in the circumstance we're talking about, if you say nothing, and like at this point you'd have to just avoid the person. Like you can't even respond to texts or emails or something because you're thinking one thing and you haven't said it. So now you're sort of divided. And like, again, you don't have to sort out everything with the other person. Sometimes you can just sort something out within yourself and say, you know what? I don't think it's worth it to me to go into it with that person. I don't think it's gonna, in the long run, I don't think she's gonna hear me. And I don't want to go through it, and I don't have to. As long as you can wish them well and send them on their way. There's no right answer on how, sadly, maybe there's no right answer in how you need to deal with that person, right? And I think saying something nice as a way to buy time isn't necessarily bad. I think it's kind of sweet, actually. But, I also know that this situation, you're still thinking about it, right? Because it's kind of unresolved. And that's sort of great, because in these places where we're like, okay, I don't really know what to say. I don't know what I want to say. I don't know what's going to help. But like, these are great. This is spiritual practice. It's not sitting on your cushion like, oh,
Yeah,
with
it's actually been awesome. Like, this is Buddhism. I'm learning so much from this experience. I'm trying to turn it into a teaching moment, and that's been nice. But yeah, it's just always like right here.
Right, because the fact is, the example you're bringing up is kind of big. It's kind of emotionally charged. It's not like the end of the world, but big enough to be on your mind. And as you sort of sort through, choosing how you want to deal with this particular person, it might help you, because this probably happens, as you said, all the time, where you kind of have something to say that's a little bit like, this is what's real. And instead you're like, it's not nice, and I'm nice. And then sometimes I bet it really bugs you, even if not with her, other times. So that's what's fun about this, is like to figure out how we want to speak in the world, staying true to your personality and your tendencies. And you get to, to be you and decide how you is. But to maybe not feel frustrated or sort of thwarted in expressing things that might be helpful. And I'm not saying it is to her, but if it's happening all the time, I bet there are times when a couple of clear sentences might actually clear things up and make things more harmonious going forward for you with the people, especially with the people like family, who you can't be like, you know what? No, I'm just not going to be friends with them anymore. Like, I mean, unless you cut the person out of your life, your family's with you. And I actually love that, because there have been times, with my mom over the years where I wanted to be like, no, I'm just not going to have a relationship with her, but I wouldn't do that to her. And it's not warranted, just because we've had challenges. And she has made me figure stuff out. And I value that very, very highly, because I could skate through life. I don't have that many difficult people in my life, actually. And I could skate through and not work on anything. Or I could really go there with her for the long haul, as long as she's around. And really, what I learned with her applies to everyone in subtle ways. I didn't know it, right? I thought all my other relationships were fine, and except that's not true, because there's stuff that comes out in romantic relationship that's about how I relate to her. It's fascinating. So the Tibetans say to like take challenges as the path, and to appreciate them, as you were saying. And when I can, I try to do that. Um, and without places of difficulty, we don't grow. We just coast along, and coasting can be really pleasant. But it's even more fun to grow and have things be, yeah.
I think clarity is going to be really hard for me, but I'm excited to try.
Yeah, and again, do it slow.
Yeah.
Do it slow. Make it doable. Don't push yourself to, do it in a way that it's fun. Baby steps. Jennifer.
That was a really moving example Annie just shared. And I find what I do in situations like that is betray myself. That's my big thing, is like, I'll like jump up to a level where everything is okay. And then we go our separate ways, and I'm left with this soul crushing cinder block on my chest. And what I'm trying to do is say, I don't know how to respond. Just that, at least for me, doesn't betray me to myself. And I got so much out of what you were talking about today, which is when I betray myself, I sort of carry this, my karmic load gets heavier and heavier, and then I respond inappropriately to things that don't warrant it. So it's that I'm trying so hard. I had a physical thing happen where all of a sudden I couldn't do something that I could do forever. And the doctor said that the reason it's happening is because it happened once and it was painful, and you just completely covered it over. That was 6 years ago. So it was 6 years of building up this like calcification. So now I'm trying to say, I don't know how to respond right now, and let that be okay. And it's really hard.
Well, that also sounds honest though, because I don't know how to respond. So maybe in saying that, I'm actually being honest, and you are being honest.
Exactly. And it's not about myself.
Right.
You know,
Like that.
And keep in mind, you can respond a day later, a week later, a month later. Like, if it's worth taking the time for you, it's okay. If that's how long it takes you to, you can write a letter, you can write a text, you can call them, you can email them, you can do nothing. It's like, it's up to you. But just because you don't know, like not knowing what to say in the moment is normal, right? In something big. Acknowledging that, Jennifer, I think is wonderful. But even if you don't manage to acknowledge it, you can still, tell someone later. It's okay. And sometimes waiting, as I've found for me, since I'm not good at like waiting to respond, it gives me time to actually see over the course of a few days, how does my feeling change? How does it shift? What stays? What goes? What was just like short-term reaction, and what really sunk in as actually, they don't even know they hurt my feelings when they said that. And I know if this is someone close to me and I tell them, they won't do that again, hopefully, when they can, because it might be habitual. Anyway, these are all great. And, as everyone's saying, like, do it your way. Figure out what works for you. Trial and error is great. And don't try to do everything and change everything at once. Gradual change is what tends to stick. Don't think about crash diets or you want to make gradual change that will feel good and be sustainable and keep growing. So there's no rush or timeline on this stuff. No pressure. Even just thinking about it is amazing. Like getting home and saying, you know what, I didn't say this thing that I wanted to say. Like, that's great. Knowing that, like, instead of just stuffing it down or just feeling the heaviness. And yeah, just becoming more conscious of it is huge. Robin?
Well, something popped out at me during the contemplation, and I think it was there. I think it wasn't just in my head, but and it was the last thing. And I think it was also, don't lie to yourself. Is that right? Okay. Somehow that felt very strong to me.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Hugely interesting area. And again, possibly a long-term sort of contemplation, if that resonated, like maybe something you, consider from time to time. All right, I have your 2 quotes for today. Oh, and Robin, also, I'll try to put together a list that's more organized of things you might practice. So this is from writer Michael Ventura. He says, the people you have to lie to own you. The things you have to lie about own you. And then from Anne Lamott, also a writer, she says, you can either practice being right or practice being kind. Thank you.